This is a convening of a workshop for the board of directors of the Netarts-Oceanside Sanitary District. This workshop is being recorded. We have 4 members present, so it's definitely a public meeting. I don't know that we really need to introduce anybody since everybody knows everybody. The only board member not present is Jeff. Hopefully,
unless somebody
this afternoon.
who is curious watches the video.
It would show.
Yeah, but
Well, okay. My name is John Prather. I'm chair of the board.
Jim Carlson.
Simeon Dreyfus, I'm secretary of the board.
Jerry Keenan, treasurer.
Dan Mello, district superintendent.
Erin Mello, office manager.
Brian Mello, lead operator.
Okay. So, a lot of places to start. I know Erin went ahead and condensed the workshop list. And right below that should be kind of the one that's in a larger format. And I suppose one of the things to first discuss is I had posed sort of an objective to develop a board proposal and input to a 5-year maintenance and capital improvement development plan for the sanitary district. Realizing that there is a sheet here from November when we were working on the workshop that one of the topics is human resources, but I was thinking of starting out with the capital improvement development discussion and plan and just see how that goes. This, as I said in that expanded sheet, the project will be used as a factor input in the development and or revision of the 2018 wastewater system facilities plan. So,
Now,
comments, thoughts
one more time. I'm not getting it.
from, I'm sorry. Okay. When we were originally planning the workshop, you and I had some discussions,
Right.
and the focus was to a large degree human resources. But also
Kind of.
okay. But I don't want to necessarily set that aside on the long term and keep it as a thought that we will be working on at some point. But I thought today we would work on the facilities and capital improvement area. Is that, maybe I'm being confusing.
I think that makes sense. This is Simeon. I think it makes sense because, among other things, we have a budgeting cycle that starts next month. And there are implications for the facilities, for the budget of what we figure out about this facilities plan. If we need to start investing, we need to work that into the budget in some way.
Well, we got 3-4 months of budget talks, meetings.
We do.
My point for this was, and I'm willing to go with whatever, but that we discuss things in this meeting, this workshop, stuff that normally doesn't come up with regular monthly meetings. And I have a short list in my head.
Okay.
But I don't want to throw things off.
Well, this is open, I mean, to whatever we collectively decide we want to do.
I mean, I think that in the monthly meetings, we also defer talk of long-term capital things besides just the recital that Dan gives us. So the 3 or 4 months of budget talks are going to focus on this next year's budget, not long-term. So both that and HR need separate attention. I am more interested in pinning down a better understanding and consensus on the capital construction stuff first, but definitely not table HR, but say, yeah, and then HR too. And and that can be part of today, maybe later, or we definitely set a special time for that also. But if I'm forced to choose, I would like to focus more on the big ticket items that we need to plan for than the HR succession. If I have to choose, they're both important.
I would be curious, Jim, to hear your list, just so that we know what those issues are and know the things that we need to find a time to discuss somewhere, if not today.
Okay. Planned obsolescence
Of people?
of the facilities.
Oh, okay, so that's not HR. Okay.
We need to make sure that this board and the community has an understanding of our commitment to deal with the lagoon issues down the road.
You're talking sludge haul.
Yes.
Solids.
And the reason for that is the technology, well, the permitting for where it ends up is constantly changing. And we may be if we don't stay right on top of it, we'll be in a position where we're owed all this money to put us sled. Anyway,
And
that's just a thing of mine. That
No, you're
I
not,
worry
you're not
about.
off. It's a priority item.
Just so we keep track of the industry. If some major changes take place, we'll prepare ourselves for it.
okay, third.
Staff recruitment. I would just be curious to know, for instance, how many positions in the county are available, or people actually working for, sewer, Rockaway, I don't know, Manzanita. And if there's any possibility down the road to develop a relationship with the community college to help with recruitment and training. Community outreach is probably something that I think we should work on. And, other than your newsletter, Jerry, that's about it, really. I don't know how many people are looking at our website monthly, but
Yeah, same thing true for the water districts and stuff. That's
because, years ago when the plant was, it was not good.
People are always surprised when a big bill comes through.
Yeah, so that's just being proactive. And then the succession planning for staff and superintendent.
okay. Well, the first two, I consider to be part of what John was talking about, I think, for capital discussion today. And the other three are definitely stuff we need to talk about. So I am more than willing to, if we can't get deeply into that as part of your thoughts today, we should set up a time to do it because that's pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, because, usually the agenda is pretty full. And to throw anything new and different in the mix. And we certainly don't want to have to do these workshops very often.
Okay.
Anyway, so
So I might as well throw my 2 cents in. It's Dan. I thought we were gonna go through what John had written up and kind of prioritize, ABC, where we wanted those topics would tell me what information to get for the board. Some of these are that Jim brought up are probably a higher priority than others as far as timeline goes. Everything deals with budgeting year to year. Every scope that you look at, to prioritize what needs to replace, and how do we look at the future, and how do we look at emergencies that can come. So are we not gonna go through this and prioritize? Or are we gonna work off of what Jim wants here?
Well,
Or
the reason I just did this is because I just want it to be on the record and be, so that whatever people decide, I'm
You
fine with
didn't
that.
want Microsoft, which you
No.
were ready.
But I just wanted,
so each one of these, so that you know, deals with budget.
right,
Each thing you brought up, in my mind, deals with.
but it's
Budget now.
not, there's not an immediacy with those areas that I was talking about. So it's not like, gotta get with it right today.
Right.
But down the road,
I affirm Jerry's point that everything that Jim mentioned is stuff we need to talk about. My personal interest, having just reread chapter 8 this morning and thinking to myself, well, we've done some of that. Some of it we haven't done. I'm curious what Dan's perspective is on how those priorities may have shifted. And it seems to me that walking through this list would get us in that direction.
And part of my thought is not that we go through each item and say, well, this is something we need to work on right away or not. It's more or less to bring back to recent memory the overall system and the pieces of it that perhaps one or two board members have not thought about that much for a while. And then we go wherever we want to go with it. But I mean, I kind of divided it into the components and then the budget and then other considerations and the facility plan update, etc. Today, I wanted to include the chapter 8, and I don't know if that is highlighted. It came through highlighted, which I thought was pretty interesting and worthwhile with their prioritization criteria, and then prioritize groups, just to keep that in mind as we look at other things along the pathway. So, perhaps what you're saying, Simeon, is good, that Dan gives us a kind of a rundown on what he's thinking and what he faces day to day and expects to face in the future. So if there's no other different thoughts, I'll kind of turn it over to you to offer some comments.
Okay, well, I have been saying for quite a while that we need to update our capital plan. And everything that you've listed here, a lot of that falls under the project of your capital improvement plan. And you're correct. Some things we've done, because priorities change. And so we need to, it's not that hard to prioritize what capital projects we need to take care of. Avalon pump stations 1, treatment plant upgrade, pump station upgrade, things like that are coming in the near future. But all of it, especially after what just happened last month at the main pump station, our budget is not set up to handle issues that Jerry's been bringing up for almost 2 years. We get money back, whether it's reimbursements for engineering, legal costs back, Now, insurance reimbursements, we have no place to put that other than other revenue into general fund, which once it goes into there, how do we put it back where it came from? So we need to restructure or have a deep look at our budget process and what we can do legally. So, and I've been thinking about it ever since you brought it up with engineering fees. It makes perfect sense. Now this catastrophic failure, we're going to have close to $200,000 in checks coming back in. We can't return it back to the funds that we're going to deplete. It's just going to go to cash carry forward. And how do you explain that? How do I explain that to you? How do you explain it to the public? Why?
How do our auditors explain it?
Well, that's the other thing. Aaron and I, we talked about that yesterday. We have to ask the auditors how we can change our budget.
Yeah.
But if not, the public's going to get a false impression of why we increase user rates when you have a $200,000, $300,000 cash carry forward because you got reimbursement for stuff. So this is going to mess with how we plan our future budgets and incorporate this stuff in. Does that make sense? Right. So I think we need to, since we're going into budget, we need to prioritize that. We need to get with the auditors, we need to get with legal counsel, whatever it takes, and we need to revamp our budgeting.
So just so that I know I understand, you're suggesting there might be an useful, if we can figure it out, a useful mechanism to say return insurance money that covered
Reimbursements, yeah.
An engineering crisis to the engineering budget line rather than to the general fund.
So yes and no, if I understand what you're saying. So when I was talking about engineering, the hotels, for example,
Yeah.
we were going to have our engineers that we were going to have to get reimbursement.
Reimbursement from the hotels.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
to back to the district
Right.
to put it back in that fund.
Right.
But after this catastrophic failure, we are going to get insurance money back, but we're going to deplete and go over our line items. Hopefully not our entire category, but we're going to go over because we have no mechanisms to put these back. And I think we need to address our budgeting since we're starting next month. And then in that capital resource, and because those are the two you're going to reimburse, general fund and capital resource. So you're operating. We need to get that fixed. I mean, I can give you a list of future capital improvement projects, but unless we get this budget fixed that will accept this, it's going to make trying to figure out what to do with our user rates in the future, starting this next budget year, almost impossible. So my priority after what I'm just going through and with insurance, and falls back to what you said the last couple of years, we need to fix that first before we can move further on any of these capital projects. Biosolids is a big one. We're probably going to switch over to the other lagoon in the next couple of years. That buys us maybe 6 or 7 years before we have to haul the biosolids. On top of that, we don't have control over disposal of biosolids. We have to do what DEQ and EPA say do it. Doesn't matter what technology comes up. We have to write a plan and we have to get that with DEQ. That just came in our new NPDES permit that started March 1st. So some of the chess pieces now are getting moved. In my mind.
You're speaking, I mean, you're not saying, okay, we need to sit here and solve that budget issue now.
No.
You're still prioritizing
No.
topics.
So
And you're
I'm saying
that's the preliminary threshold thing that needs to be addressed. But
So-
we're also then going to move into these other items.
to me,
Can I just really ask you, is that something we do, or is that something we contact the State Department of Revenue for advice on options, or how do we solicit advice on our options to do it?
so we don't have to go to the Department of Revenue. We have to go to our auditor to find out how you set up your budget to accomplish what we want to accomplish in it.
Okay, so that's the task associated with
So
that
the
priority.
task to me is number one task that we need to be looking at, since we're going to be doing it in a couple weeks anyway, is how do we I'm gonna say, correct our budget for these future expenditures. And if we have more, we need to correct the budget. I think that's priority one.
It's redesigning it is what we're doing.
You're redesigning it.
And
I don't think it's difficult,
Yeah,
but
the auditor is supposedly following Department of Revenue guidelines,
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
That's why I suggested maybe they've got some seminars or options, because I have heard you speak in ways that are not kindly of the auditor. And I have had great experience when I had to learn stuff about public budgeting with the Department of Revenue. They seem to be really open to helping on that issue. So I'm not saying we're gonna
they
solve
are, and my, not speaking well of the auditor, is its communication skill. We don't speak his language.
it. That
Just like I don't expect him to speak the language of what I do for a living either. But when you're trying to reach out for help from him, he doesn't really give it to you. You're more of a bother trying to understand what he's talking about to meet these.
Okay, so that's strategy. So now
Yeah.
we have to figure that out.
Yeah.
Then are you ready now to keep going down your list of priority things, or?
Well, I was reviewing,
Because I'm making an agenda here in my brain is what I'm.
right, so
I
what,
wanted to add one thing before we move on to something else. And that is, rather than spend a whole bunch of time trying to figure out how to do this budget changeover, find out who is the expert that we work with and have them take care of it. So we're not, wondering.
right, so.
I mean, because
it's twofold.
if we spend a bunch of time discussing how to change it ourselves, I mean, you two guys are the experts on budgets. I'm not.
No, that's what I was saying.
So,
I'm saying something you are. I was saying go to the Department of Revenue because they have like
yeah, well,
seminars for lay
anyway,
people.
either one, it doesn't matter. I mean, to me, to make sure that we're not wasting time in wondering what to do.
I'm not suggesting the board figure. Okay, what I'm suggesting is the top priority, get a hold of the auditor, tell the way he needs to see it, the way budgeting law works. And then if we have to do a resolution, we have to do something about the budget and legal counsel. We don't write it up ourselves. We don't make those changes. We seek professionals to make those changes.
Saying.
Yeah. So it's not something the board's gonna sit here and say, oh, no, we're gonna do this and this. We're gonna have to find out, those basics on changing that budget so that.
Now, does Wes Tech do that?
No. You're gonna deal with the auditor and then you're going to deal with with probably legal counsel or something. Is what you're gonna deal with.
All right.
Don't forget the Department of Revenue is free. Yeah.
Well, the auditor, I think, is free. I think we can give advice, but they always tell us you send it to your legal counsel to write.
Okay.
That's usually what they tell.
Okay.
SDO will tell you the same thing. Try to see it. They will not give you legal advice, but they will give you guidance.
Did you pose this specific question to SDO?
Yes.
And did they have any
We
advice?
don't give legal advice.
Yeah.
Legal counsel,
Okay.
they'll give you examples of maybe other entities, other cities or districts that have done something similar, but they won't actually give you a statute to go by.
It's always accountants versus lawyers. There's actually a treaty written between accountants and the bar about where does the practice of law stop and accounting start. That is a decades old gray area.
So I found that if you go to legal counsel, you already have everything you want the legal counsel to address. You don't want them to go do the research for you. Just the auditor will give you what they need or what's required for the audit, for your budget to meet state law. And you just have them right away.
Okay, so
Do you have an estimate of timeline for contacting the auditor, getting a suggestion, contacting legal counsel? How long are we talking to get a solution on this?
We'll probably talk.
Done by next board meeting.
Yeah, so
Well,
Okay.
we should have it done before we meet with any kind of budget.
Right.
right. So
Okay.
we're not in charge of turnaround with the auditor. So if the board's okay with it, tomorrow we'll have Aaron send them an email, making a request.
Yeah.
I want it all done in writing,
Yeah.
so we have a trail.
Yeah.
And, once he gives his response, then what we'll do is, bring that to the board or give it directly to legal counsel to find out what they need
Okay.
to do. Then they'll also advise us what the board needs to do.
That timeline sounds good to me. Intuitively, I was thinking, yeah, we should have this in a month. The thrust of my question was, is that possible? And it sounds like it is.
I don't think that this is anything new that they have to
Yeah.
invent the wheel for.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm with you on how often what accountants say doesn't sound interpretable to me. I'm like, what?
Well, yes, but they can direct us on how to direct legal counsel
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the board on what they need to see for the,
Yeah.
because they write your report card.
Yep, they do.
They send it to the internal revenue.
Yeah, they do.
Or into the state treasury. So,
Okay, so assuming we're gonna be able to do that, then next.
And I don't know, do you need more from the board other than what
no,
we said here?
I think if.
We've
if
given you the
board's in
go-ahead.
agreement with that
Yeah.
process, we'll start that process.
I agree.
And we can give you the best update or the
Okay.
next update we have for next month.
You know, we're not really voting on specific resolutions or
No,
specific items. I think there's a general consensus that this is something that's important and to go ahead and proceed. Unless anybody has any other thoughts. Next,
so objectives. I didn't see this. Just a little while ago. The capital improvement plan that
well,
was sent.
and I just threw that in so that it could be referenced as far as, because it seemed like at the front of that chapter 8, there was a nice set of prioritization criteria,
Mhm.
and which is probably what they will also have in any future revisions. I mean, I don't know that changes. And the groups, as far as near-term, intermediate, and long-term improvements. So that was the main reason I threw it in. And then there's a page or two that listed some of the items.
Yeah, specifically
8.3
8.3 and 8.4. I would be curious to have you look at that at some point today and say, yeah, this is done, this is done, this is done. We deferred this, blah, blah, blah. Just because this is a nice kind of, here's a bunch of priorities as of January 2019. And like I say, when I look at this, I think, yeah, I can tick off, I think we've done some of this. And then there's stuff down here in the third category that I'm sure we haven't done.
Page
8.3.
8.3.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm just, but if you wanted to back up and, as is listed on this agenda, just walk us through the very quickly basic structure of the sewage system, how the whole thing works. That review I wouldn't mind that review.
Okay.
I'd love that.
So one last thing, the new NPDS permit is now requiring the district to make repairs to their collection system. I have to have a plan written and into DEQ by September. That's new. So DEQ is also
Plan of current repairs or future repairs?
future repairs and mainly dealing with ion.
And is, okay, and is that something you'll have to do every year from now on? Is that a once a year thing? Yeah, who knows? Okay,
So, so what's required by September, so you understand the permit, it's written for 5-year
right,
increment. So it'll be what we're going to do over the next 5 years.
got it, got it,
So how we're gonna prioritize, what we're prioritizing, and what our plans are.
right,
Which will also have to be figured out, or,
right.
into the budget.
And facilities plan.
The facility plan is our choice, but the facility plan is a little more extensive. I mean, I could go here and say, well, that's done. Netarts F1, Netarts force main fabricated PVC replacement, that's done. So, I have to go through this, but just giving a cursory look, there are some things done. Some things will move further out, some things are gonna move closer out. So, if the board's asking me to give you a cursory of right now where we sit with the district, are you wanting to know where we are for repairs, future repairs, current repairs?
I think we were talking about, going more elementary and go through the physical elements of our process and equipment. And as you're doing that, maybe you can throw in, and this is gonna wear out pretty soon, or this is a long-term item. And don't go into the nuts and bolts too much, just give us an overview, because it's all in your head, I'm sure.
And
But we don't even have the basic understanding of the process.
Yeah, and Brian walked me around when I joined the board, walked me around the facility, and I looked at stuff and he told me how it worked.
So,
I don't know if I remember all that.
not to get into the nuts and bolts of it, control panel,
So,
pump stations are.
Do you want to go back to what we had as our main sheet here and just kind of go down the list?
Well,
Or
The NOSD components list.
Yeah.
Might be, there must have been some thought put into that order that was written in.
Well, yeah, I met with John on this a couple different times.
Yeah, let's make use of your work.
Wastewater treatment plant, description components. Description components.
Like, what's that building at the bottom of the hill? What are these things?
Okay.
What's that thing out on Netarts
And
Bay?
when the sewage
How are they
comes in,
connected? How
where does it go?
when it
How does
comes
it
in,
flow
what
through? What happens to it?
Go and
Okay.
then it's out the ocean.
And that's.
And into the lagoon.
Here.
Well, that's what.
Just do it. Just let's start. Let's start from the beginning to the end of the process and name the pieces for us.
Yeah.
So that
Think
we're
about
getting some track.
I think about that.
We are. I'm trying to stop it.
At the end of this, at the end of the boundary, when that toilet flushes, what happens?
What happened? Flows through gravity lines to pump stations, transferred, conveyed to the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay, we have 3 pump stations. 9, okay, so I'm just throwing out, just like, I'm letting you know, you're skipping stuff. Okay.
Well, it depends on where you flush from.
It
Okay.
really does.
Okay, so stuff is gathered from individual homes. It goes down to, by gravity, to some main lines that connect to pump station.
It's conveyed to our conveyance lines. It's transferred to our conveyance lines.
Okay,
That'll take care of force mains, gravity. Okay.
okay, and how are we doing on those?
The conveyance lines, are doing pretty well. I mean, it's pretty robust. Your collection system is. They're subject to leaks, and generally that is found from eyes, from pinholes, root intrusions, things like that. Deterioration of concrete,
Sunken grade.
sunken grades, things like that.
So that's the stuff that you monitor with cameras and keep, and you kind of fix it as it comes up.
Yes.
Is there any overall replacement of those on a schedule, or just deal with those as issues come up? Is that in the future something that would have to be done?
Well, they're limited. They're limited by budget, of course. But
Excuse me, technically.
we try to prioritize those within our approved budget. Does that make
Yeah, no,
Okay.
so
And is there a timeline by which we look at every piece of pipe in the district that we kind of say, this year we're looking at that, this year we're looking at this? How do we know that all those pipes are in good shape?
So what we do is inspections in the wintertime and we look for increased flows in the gravity lines. Basically pull manhole width. I want to get into the nuts and bolts of it.
Right.
But if you see for after a rainstorm or something and the water table comes up, we go out and look for the heaviest leaks. The heaviest leaks that make a difference as far as conveying to the treatment plant are your lower lying pipelines. Example, the Bay. Okay, anything that lower, especially in Netarts, all of them are lower in lower elevation. Oceanside, you could have pipelines that need to be repaired, but because they don't leak, they don't contribute to your I&I because the elevation's so high.
Mhm.
You're not subjected to groundwater
Mhm.
or tidal changes.
Mhm.
Okay, so we concentrate mainly in Netarts, as you can look up there on that board, because that's where we see the most infiltration.
And what do those flags mean?
So the red ones are what are found to need repair. And the green ones are what we've already repaired, right, Ryan? Okay.
And the blue ones?
The blue ones are identifying pipe and not manholes,
Okay.
pipe sections.
So it looks like, just the layman's look at it, that there's sort of concentrated areas where we know there's repairs needed. And one of them is right along the bay that you mentioned. And there's another one up
Yes.
over, I don't know where that is, but
So inspections is what we do. That's what we have the camera equipment. We have that. They do first physical, personal inspections, determine an area, a section. And then that's what we deploy out our equipment to go give an internal inspection.
Okay, and you think of giving the board the impression in the past that inspections have kind of gotten behind because of manpower
Yes.
shortages, and where are we on that general issue?
Well, as of the 10th, we are fully staffed.
Okay, in terms of how far behind?
I would say, I would estimate we're about 5 years.
Okay, that's
Where I would, usually we try to plan 5 miles a line, sewer line, gravity line, for inspection, for repair, we're behind them. As you can see, we haven't really gotten to Oceanside yet. Seems like the priorities keep moving and Oceanside kind of gets neglected a little bit, but we're not as concerned because we don't see the II increase drastically like we do.
yeah, there's bigger elevation change, stuff flows through the line quicker, gets to the pump station, pumps out.
still, yes,
And we were
I'm-
caught up at one
yeah, we were, okay.
Yeah.
point. So, I mean,
So do you see the level of discussion we're having right now? This is what we have at the beginning. This is how it works. This is how we maintain it. And here's where we are.
Okay.
Now we can move to the next piece and do the same kind of view, because I know you were kind of struggling with, what do you want from me? As well. And that's what I would like to see.
It's
Is that
trouble
kind of
because I am a nuts and bolts, and I
Right.
know you guys don't want the nuts and bolts, you want a kind of a 30,000 foot view.
we can't use nuts and bolts until we understand the
Right.
things.
So the second priority would be, well, actually, first priority, business collection system, that can be scheduled over years to do. That's something that's never going to stop. It'll always need repair. Okay, fix a section, you gotta come back, a few years later and fix more parts of that section. The more immediate one are control panels for the pump station. There's,
So if you get back up for a second, where we have a red or pinkish marking, that means you did a visual inspection with the camera equipment and
No.
determined that something needs to be done?
these are flagging manholes.
Okay,
Then the blue ones are flagging areas for repair for pipelines. Segments, pipe segments.
so are the manholes to put those inserts in them? that you put in, through that company that puts the coating?
Lining, the coating,
The
yeah,
coat, is that what we're
Yeah.
talking about?
yeah, that's an insert.
Okay,
Yeah, so, yes, these are what we identify that we want the company to come in and make repairs. We've been doing really good on keeping up with that on the manhole. Those are easier, we can identify those quickly, we can budget that, we can have them come out and do it. Pipeline segments are where we're falling behind on, because those are larger, takes more crew to go out, run all the equipment. So those are harder to schedule and keep up on than say individual manholes.
And that's you put a fiberglass patch inside that heats up and,
Yeah, it's a special coating. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so we were doing the flow and we got 2 collection lines and now that
Now
takes
we're
us
at
to the pump station.
And that,
Okay.
that gets us down to those black stars on the map, right? That's the pump
The
stations.
black stars, every black star you see is a pump station.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
now, how do those work? Those pump stuff up to here, right? And they involve a pump and they involve a control panel for the pump. And they involve generators in case they fail, or there's a power outage. So how are we doing on the, I know I'm steering you guys, but I'm just kind of,
Mhm.
now how are we doing at the 30,000 foot level on those? And I know you're about to tell us about the control panels.
So control panels are your highest priority right now because they're the oldest and becoming, if not already obsolete, on their way to obsolete. And when I use the term obsolete, just so you know, that means we can no longer get parts for them.
Mhm.
They're not obsolete to me if I can still make repairs and they still make parts. So obsolete, we're getting ready to do a control panel at Ocean Highlands.
Mhm.
You've already approved that.
Mhm.
The final dollar amount on that is going to be probably 75,000 when we're done with it. Now, we've already paid the 50,000 for the control panel. Now it's just the installation. So control panels at the pump stations are first. Secondly is generator maintenance repair. There are some piping maintenance that we do, but we usually keep a pretty good stock on parts for those. Fortunately, those don't go obsolete.
Mhm.
Okay, so the piping, the hard piping is not on the verge of obsolete where you have to change materials in it.
How about the pumps themselves? Are they obsolete as well?
No, flight pumps that we use, the brand of pump, we still have them in service from 1993.
So it's the electronics that is going out of
Electronics that
date so
controls the
quickly.
pumps.
Yeah.
It's not to say that flight won't eventually drop a pump design and we'll have to buy a different one, to do the next upgrading because they no longer make parts to repair the old one. But that really hasn't happened much over
Mhm.
my 3 decades of doing this.
So we had a conversation, a board meeting or 2 ago, where you were talking about the way in which the sewer industry had monopolized, and there was some planned obsolescence that Jim was talking about, I think relating to these control panels, and that there was an option that you were recommending of not using the one company,
Proprietary.
Yeah.
Proprietary controls.
but going to more sort of less out of the box, more
More
customized.
generic, out of the box where you now are open and you have more ability to get contractors up that are just, flight controllers. They can use components. There's it gives us more flexibility on who we can hire to come in and work on something.
And is that going to help the obsolete control panel problem?
Yes, that'll help the obsolete control, because when I'm talking about obsolete ones, when those are proprietary controllers, and then that company changes its design, now
They want you to buy the new one because that's how they make money.
Yeah, but when you go non-proprietary, those are components.
Mhm.
And readily, what most of your control panel people, companies do now is they basically use off-the-shelf parts. What we call off-the-shelf, most of our houses carry the components.
Mhm.
So you're not as restricted on repairs you can make.
And the Ocean Highlands control panel we're putting in,
It's proprietary.
that's proprietary. So that's the last
That's the
proprietary.
last proprietary panel.
From here forward, we won't do that.
From here forward, we will not do that.
Okay,
Because it does hinder the district, plus the costs are higher, because now you've been monopolized with stated fees.
Yeah.
So,
And how about the physical structures of the pump stations, the sheds or whatever? How that's-
all but the fiberglass ones, all of them were block built, so the structures are
brick?
brick,
Yeah,
block.
okay.
Yeah.
I got corrected by a block layer that they're not brick.
Okay.
So anyway,
Correctly
the
correct.
red ones are bricks, these are blocks. So it's just like what this building's built out of.
Mhm.
These have a much longer life to them. They're all metal roofs on them. The, what's called an FRP, which is a fiberglass structured ones, those are what we would see if we have to replace those. Those would be complete replacement.
Okay.
So
And
those are not a priority, not bringing, I mean, I'll put them in the facility plan, but that's down, that's many years away. I'll probably, won't ever see us have to change one out. I'll teach the guys what they need to do and what they look for and how to do it, but it's something that I wouldn't assume we would have to deal with for another 15 or 20 years.
so I know you never saw a failure like the one we just had on a pump. And you told us last month that was probably a installation issue.
Correct.
Did that installer put in any other pumps that we need to be worried about?
He did all the pumps at the one. So today, which I was gonna have a board meeting night, but I'll just give you a quick. Xylem came out, replaced what they called all the hardware, all the studs and nuts and everything have been replaced on all the pumps. Except for
Okay.
one.
Which one?
The new one we just put in.
Okay.
But they were all pulled and checked and then reinstalled.
Did they find other problem?
No, we did find problems. I did shut down one pump train, which were 2 pumps. Because of vibration and shaking issues, they did find loose studs and nuts in those. So,
So loose versus too tight.
loose is bad because when that pump,
I know, but the issue down here was the too tight.
well, yeah, a problem with too tight, you don't know it's too tight till it breaks. That's the unfortunate part. When they're over tight, you can't physically see that. But if the thing's vibrating and you see the nut turning or the washer jumping around, you can see that one's too loose. But on the other hand, you can't see the other one. It lets you know once it fails.
Is it a torque issue?
There's stainless steel, didn't you tell me?
Yes, there's stainless steel. And again, I don't want to get into the minutia of it,
Right.
but
That is-
the stainless steel studs have no stretch to them. They're brittle, they break. You need stainless steel because of the environment the pumps
Right.
have to live in. Water, sewer, and all that. If you bottom out a stud and you twist it, you created what's called a torsional twist or torsional break. Okay? They're not meant to clamp that way. That's not where they get their strength from.
Mhm.
And just found out today that those are consumables from the manufacturer that should be changed out, which Xylem is now making changes in their own shop on when to change those out.
Oh, so on a schedule.
On a schedule. So like, they haven't figured it all out yet, but they're thinking every 4 or 5 rebuilds. You just automatically in your quote, you're gonna get quoted for new studs, like $150, okay? Versus
But-
losing a pump that costs $155,000.
Yeah, I was gonna say $150 is a cheap fix.
Yeah, it's rather cheap insurance.
Okay,
Okay,
so
so,
returning to 30,000 feet,
okay,
is that we covered all the components of the pump stations in terms of,
Does everybody understand how that pump station works in regard to PUD comes in with the power? And it's basically controlled through the control panel, I'm assuming,
it's controlled
At some point.
through the switch gear.
through the switch.
Okay, yeah, it comes into the building from PUD and then it's distributed through the electrical panel to your soft starts and then to your control panel.
So then it goes to
It
the,
goes from high voltage to low voltage for control.
and then it goes to the electric motor on top of the pump, basically. that,
Which
runs
is,
the pump.
there's some kind of sensor down in the tank
Separate-
that says when.
Separate from the generator
Card,
and the
too.
diesel
Yeah,
engine.
you guys are getting in the nuts and
Yeah, in
bolts.
fact, you guys, I'm about ready to yell for it. I don't care about that.
We can probably, I could probably go into that a little further before meeting if you want,
Yeah, but I
Okay.
mean,
because I'm gonna discuss.
you need to
it.
understand, when you're
Okay.
talking generator, he's not talking, that's the backup system.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
But the controller controls when to turn the generator on.
The controller, think of it simply as it's that light switch. You
Yeah.
want the lights on, you turn it on. You
Yeah.
want the lights off, you turn it off.
Yeah.
That is not what runs the pump.
Yeah.
That is just a component that tells when to energize the high voltage side of it.
Okay. So
But it's
that'll-
thinking about levels in the tank, it's
That
thinking
is
about all kinds
now-
of stuff.
You were on building where I was gonna go next, so the roof
Yeah.
is 20, 30 years down. What we're seeing failures on that we may have to address will be doors, just due to the environment that we live in here. So doors will be a component. If the main pump station is the only one with a roll-up door,
Mhm.
which is eroded away. I showed you components of it last month. So that's the only pump station that we have that has a large, like, garage style door. But we're already taking care of that, new components. We're expecting that will be a 20-year plan to look at changing it out again. We don't have to look at that in the facility plan as a priority. So a lot of the pump stations will be moved when we redo the facility. Will be moved further out because we're doing repairs now.
Mhm.
Ocean Highlands will go out further
Mhm.
because of that simple.
Mhm.
So what you see in this capital improvement is gonna drastically change.
Okay.
So pump stations, collection system we've covered. Now we're coming up to the treatment plant.
Yeah, and the lines that takes up to the treatment plant, what are those called?
Our pressure lines.
Pressure lines?
Yeah.
Okay, the pump creates the pressure and it shoves the stuff up. Are those lines okay?
So those pressure lines, there's no way to inspect them. You only know that they don't work is when they fail.
And how long have ours been there since the plant was constructed?
Ours been in service for almost 13 years.
What's their life expectancy?
Everything is on a 20-year plan. I can only give you the answer that DEQ is allowed to design 20 years out.
So we can
Force
anticipate,
mains, depending on what material they were used on, like our newer force mains are all what's called HDPE. So the technology changed, we've replaced those force mains. Those force mains are not scheduled, for another 20 plus years. Manufacturer said the pipe's good for 50.
with the pressure line from the main pump station up here, we need to look at in the next 7 years.
There's the, it'll be in the facility plan. I'm gonna defer that to engineering. I've talked to the manufacturers and they say, don't worry about that line. It won't corrode, it won't erode, it won't. A road could say.
And it'll bend.
It'll bend, it's flexible. But nothing's forever.
Yeah.
Okay. The weak points to any of them are gonna be where each joint is welded together. Now, can we move off of that? Okay,
And that line runs up Cape Mears Loop and then up the road to here.
yeah, so it runs where you see there's 2 stars in Oceanside. So the first one you see to your right.
can point it out.
The force main runs from that main pump station up to our driveway, up
Mhm.
Cape Mears Loop. Point to it, Brian. It comes up this way. And then it goes up to the treatment plant where you see the other 2 stars.
Mhm.
So the lower star is, it's nothing.
So the force
Yeah,
from-
so it goes into right there, it goes in the treatment plant.
And then our secondary main.
Our force main going back is rather short, so the force main goes right up to that turn, go up, Brian. Right up to about there, then it gravities, come on down.
Right.
Then come on back down the
Oh,
road.
this way.
Yeah, now it gravities, come all the way down, keep coming, gravities to that, out to that vault, go past the star, now it goes out in the ocean. That is,
down again.
yeah,
Yes.
so that line is constructed, 98% of that line is not pressure, but it's made out of pressure line. the same, the same material. That goes all the way out into the ocean almost a mile. That one is, I'm gonna tell you, is permanent. Unless we see a large earthquake tear the ground apart, which there won't be any Oceanside left anyway, that's the only way that line is drilled in 200 feet deep into bedrock.
Oh, okay.
Okay, before it surfaces out by south of the rocks.
So even if it leaks, it doesn't have anywhere to go.
And there's no way to inspect it to detect anything like it.
And there's not a lot of pressure on
There's no pressure.
it. So
Yeah, the pressure stops going back just at, is just
Yeah,
at that
right up
first
at the
turn
top
you
of the
make
hill.
right up on the
Yeah.
hill.
and just
Then
as
it goes
an
like that.
aside, it's quite a lift.
Yeah.
To get to.
Yeah.
From the pump station to top of the
So
hill.
district's already spent nearly $1 million putting in the outfall. And we spent several $100,000 bringing the lines up to here.
Mhm.
Those were considered pretty much a permanent unless you have ground movement.
Mhm.
That's the only caveat the engineers put in, manufacturer, if you have a slide or your ground moves, the pipe can go with it. Which is not, has anything to do with their manufacturing. Okay, so now we're at the treatment plant. The treatment plant, what can go wrong here? It's mainly all concrete. So we have components. So the components have a 20-year lifespan. Theoretically, that's what they're planned for. You can usually get another 10 to 15 years out of them with maintenance.
Component means the tank, the
No,
concrete.
no, that's all concrete. That's only subject to earthquakes for cracking.
Okay, so components is the parts.
So the components are what operate the plant, not the concrete structure. We do have concrete work to do out there at the headworks because some of the rebar is now expanding and cracking the headworks. We can't put our gates in, which we'll go into that later. So we're gonna have to plan, which will be in the facility plan, and I'll talk to the board about it. We're gonna have to schedule, have contractors come in and redo part of that concrete work that's up there. But when I'm talking about components, the grit remover, the auger to remove, the Parkson, which is to remove the rags and stuff like that. Those are your hard components, your larger cost components. Those are just maintenance. At some point, I'm sure we'll face the fact that they no longer make those and we can't get parts for them anymore. At that time, that'll be, I'm not gonna call it a capital improvement. That'll be more under replacing it with whatever the next model or that is. So those will come before any major hard piping work or any type of concrete work to the tanks, stuff like that.
And that happens there's a platform over here with some big machinery
Yeah,
on top
I
of it.
want you took you up the stairs.
Yeah,
Those-
that's where
there's
that
two
happens.
major pieces of equipment up there. Those are components that we'll have to look at probably in the next 10 years for repair replacement.
Okay.
So we'll keep it maintained. I will let you know in plenty of time, or somebody will, let you know in plenty of time that we're gonna have to, plan financially to replace those with newer units.
So those come next after the pump stations in terms
Yes,
of the
yeah.
priorities of.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. All the components up there, most of it all was out of stainless steel products so that we know it'll last longer. Our control panels that are outside are all stainless steel. The worst maintenance we have is to put new seals around the doors so water can't get into the electronics or anything. Then what you have are maintenance issues, which are components that run all of the onboard monitoring systems. So your probes, the wiring to the probes, the floats, those are all small dollar components. When I say small dollar, they're usually under $5,000 to replace those.
So back me up just a second. The effluent comes in, it gets semi-sorted. There's stuff that,
The influence that
Yeah,
comes in.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then it goes into these big tanks.
So they come in, the grit, dirt, anything that's inorganic gets pulled out of the wastewater treatment tank before it gets there.
And that goes
And then
down.
the
to-
rags, you know, the paper towels, the rags,
Right.
other feminine components all get pulled out.
And all of that goes into the lagoon. It goes,
All that goes into those dumpsters out there
Oh, okay.
and they're hauled on. What you're doing is you're cleaning the wastewater of inorganic material because inorganics don't,
Mhm.
there's nothing you can do with it. You can't treat them.
Mhm.
Then it goes into the tanks. There's a process in the tanks. There are small amounts of components in there. Our diffuser grids are probably the most that we will do maintenance on. We're getting ready to change all the diffuser caps out, which are at the bottom, which mixes your air,
Mhm.
which gives us our treatment.
And we have 3 tanks
We have 3 tanks.
and we're using 2 at any one time.
We're using. Mainly we use 2. The most we use at any one time is 2. We can't get down to 1, but that's all flow.
And so the one that's not being used, we can inspect the whole thing and see that it's,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we have to do maintenance, we schedule that. We'll switch from one basin to another after we've done the maintenance on that one. And then we'll shut that one down, drain it, clean it, and go.
and how often does that cycle happen?
It depends on if you start noticing what's called eddies or areas that aren't getting mixed. We'll see it in our lab results. We'll see it in, different monitoring components. Our pHs, our dissolved oxygen readings. So we have ways to monitor that. Okay, that's the maintenance part of that part of the treatment plant. And then you have the structure. So now you've got the blower building. Blower building contains all of your motor control circuitry and it contains your main operating computer for the entire treatment system. It also houses your generator for the treatment plant, and it also houses your blowers.
And that's the building over that way?
Yes.
Okay.
So the blowers, you will look at, we've replaced them. You can usually get 5 to 7 years out of a blower without having to pull it to have it rebuilt. We do have a spare, and so those components are at the lower scale of your expenditures. Those you can usually take care of in what you have right now in your O&M line item, operations maintenance line item. Those are major components there. Same thing, block building, same thing, metal roof. There's a fan in there. There's some other components, but those are usually lower down, louvers, things like that. Those aren't anything that you look at going obsolete. I haven't seen the design of a louver change in 30 years. So those will be probably in the facility plan, but under a list of maintenance type of items that you should look at 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Okay. Now you have the next you have decanters in your basins. Those
Jargon. What are decanters and,
So
basins, you said?
we're back in our basins now. We have the diffusers. The decanters, what takes the water off the top, that's what goes out to the ocean.
Okay.
Those we're probably gonna have to have looked at. They have large bearings and drives in them, motor drives. So those are coming up, I would say, in the next 3 years.
That's at
The
the,
big silver things
okay.
that come down,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Look like, I don't know, what did you call them, Brian? Grenade launchers or something. Anyway, out there.
Yeah.
Those are components, but those are like 10 to 15 year. You look at them for maintenance and maybe repair.
So
So
the,
number 1, I'm sorry. One is pump station, 2 is components of the treatment plant, and 3 is basin components.
Which is treatment plant.
So we're still on, so let's
So we're
still,
still on treatment plant. I'm just trying to work through.
yeah, I'm kind of
From-
prioritizing stuff that
Right.
as you go.
Right.
So we have to focus
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
In what order in the future. So, okay.
So then you get to your, there's nothing really in the EQ basin to do, equalization basin. Now you get to your expensive components, which is now your UV disinfection system.
which we just invested a lot of money in.
which is, look like it's starting to average cost us now in the last probably 4 years, 3, 4 years. Looking like it's costing us around $5,000 a year to keep up with the different components. So it's all electronic, runs off PLCs, runs off ultraviolet lights, it runs off cards, electrical components, and a lot of it's submerged in water. So a lot of it will lose seals and stuff like that. So now we're starting to see its age. So
And it's just taking the bacteria out of it before it goes out to the sea.
it is, it's called a disinfection system, which I've never understood why, because you're not allowed to you're allowed to disinfect, you can't sterilize. So basically what it does to the microorganisms is it basically neutralizes them. They can't reproduce.
We used to use chlorine,
Mhm.
so now we use this other system,
UV
which is better for the environment. And this way, the staff doesn't have to deal with
So
chlorine.
Chlorine, most communities don't want that type of gas or liquid around them. Second thing is chlorine is harder on your equipment. It eats up everything. It'll look like the Peter iron down in a year or two. So we got
And then
away
we'd be
from that.
dumping
This does
that out.
not,
Chlorine would be dumping out in the ocean anyway.
yeah.
Right.
Well, that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
Salt water anyway.
Yeah.
So anyway, the ultraviolet is electronic. It's a consumer of electricity.
Mhm.
So one of your highest expenses here is electricity.
Yeah.
That's one of your highest.
And which is why we've got some really big generators. So that
Um,
keeps working when the power goes out.
Yeah.
And those generators are in good shape.
Yes, they're aging. Again, I don't think we're gonna face the obsolete like we did with the one at Ocean Highlands. Ocean Highlands was a one-off, 1 year only, engine that Cummins made. And that's what Ocean Highlands development put in. So I don't think they planned it that way. It's just, that's how it worked out.
Mhm.
So I don't see any generator changes other than transfer switches. Well, we all know what happens when the transfer switch doesn't work. Yeah, so I still have on there, it'll be a facility plan when to start putting, manual transfer switches and the other ones that can. Just as a backup.
To finish the story of how things work, explain the diffuser, whatever it's called up there at the end of the pipe.
Oh, on the discharge?
Yeah.
And the ocean?
Outfall?
The duct bill.
So, yeah, it's called a duct bill. It's just a rubber diffuser that when there's a flow, it opens ever how wide according to the amount of flow coming out. And what that does, it meets the requirements for the mix zone. So as your fresh water is coming out, it has to mix with the currents in the ocean, which they're requiring us to do another mix zone study, which I don't know why, but we'll have to do one in the next couple of years, required by our NPDS permit. And I
That's
keep going
another-
back to that because
that's
it's
another-
important that you
right.
understand. D2 and EPA decide what testing and what requirements we're gonna have.
And that's another boat and diver thing.
So now instead of every other year, it'll be once every 5 years.
Okay.
Okay.
So walk me through what the lagoons do and how stuff gets into the lagoon. Where does that come from?
Okay, so the lagoon, that is the waste that's treated when we have to remove microorganisms. Either we get too much or they get too old. We have to waste, what's called wasting. We waste them out from the basins, the bottom of the basins, are waste out, and they go out to the lagoon. Right now, we're using the West Lagoon. We've been using that now for going on 13 years. It's almost full. We'll have to switch over at that. But the wasting, what you see, what goes out there is biosolids. Okay,
And when the plant is running perfectly, are we still getting stuff that goes out
every day,
every day?
every day. We
Yeah.
have to waste every day.
Okay.
We have to keep up with what we call the blanket growth, the amount of mixed liquor that's in there.
So that's kind of like at the
It's a
bottom.
biological process.
It's at the bottom of the,
It settles out. It goes
Yeah.
into settle mode, does all the, stuff it's supposed to do is scheduled. And then it'll do whatever waste the operator set to take so many gallons out of each one of the basins.
And that is
That happens
still,
every 4 hours.
and that is still liquid. It flows
Oh,
through
yeah.
a pipe.
Yeah. So if you think of solids, I know it's called biosolids, but it's probably less than 2% solids. The rest is all water.
And it goes out in the lagoon and it settles.
It settles out.
And the excess liquid just evaporates.
It does evaporate. That's how there's no discharge on the lagoon. So the solids, almost like a septic tank, the solids go to the bottom. There are no leach lines, but the wind action and all that, you get a certain amount of evaporation. It changes with seasons, the heat, the wind, and stuff like that. So that stays fairly level. If it gets too much and not evaporating enough, we can lower a gate, return that excess water back to the treatment plant, pump station, and then it pumps it back up to the headworks and we recycle it again.
This is the first time I understood there was a difference between the basins and the lagoon. I thought they were the same thing. So are these, what are
These
these?
are, the ponds are lagoons,
Okay,
the basins are the treatment plant concrete structure.
3 of them up here.
Right here. So if you look, this is when we were under construction, we had 3 basins. Right here, picture showing the basins. Everything that we're talking about, the biosolids that get wasted out, get wasted to the east and west lagoon.
I
Right now,
apologize. That took me that long to know that.
so all the treatment's done here, and here's our
And
waste.
then, so it's like a septic, we don't have leach lines. Our leach lines is we bring the surface water back off and recycle it to the plant. And it goes right back through the treatment.
Oh, and the surface water, because when the solids go in there, they settle. So what's on the
settle
top,
down.
it's just water. It
Yeah,
comes back
So
through.
it gets what's called a water cap.
Yeah.
And by our permit, we cannot go anymore. We have to maintain a minimum 4-foot water cap. Once we can't maintain that 4-foot water cap, that's what dictates when the lagoon's full.
Yeah. And the biosolids down there naturally decompose some.
Yeah, so it goes through, it decays.
Yeah.
And that depends on the health of the lagoon, the health of your biosolids you put in there, how far it will decay.
And is there any process that we do there?
Yeah, so we hire the engineer, he comes out with his boat, he has to go in and do a profile with a sludge judge, and he has to go in on a grid, set up with T2. He has to go into the grid, take these samples, and it'll tell where the depth of that sludge is. It also gives us a look at how thick it is. So at this end of the lagoon, you'll see it looks like you're dipping in the bucket. That's how thick it is. It won't decay much further, like say the other. So what we do is we have wasting pipes under the water you can't see. We open and close those to remove the sludge throughout the lagoon. To kind of keep it,
To kind of wash it level.
yeah. That's the end of it. That's the end of your treatment. Next comes hauling your biosolids,
Which we haven't done yet,
which we have not done yet
In 13 years.
in 13 years.
but we will.
Twin Rocks didn't haul for 30. It just depends on the biological process. Once we determine that it cannot decrease anymore and it's full, and that's determined by your 4-foot water cap, and that's fighting PAD here.
And how,
And the
deep
reason
is
I
the-
brought it up is that the price tag 5 years ago was $250,000. And I can tell you, the way things are going, it's probably double that now.
So
Because
but it goes, what percentage, you'll have to drain the water off. So there's a process, you'll bid that out to a contractor that comes in with, sludge pumps. How far they can dewater it to get the most percentage of water out, which decreases the amount of gallons you will haul. Now, you can't get it down to where it's like a cake, because you won't be able to suck it out. of
to
there.
put it into
And
the
you can't
tanker?
drive in there with heavy equipment because it's all lined. It's all lined. You can't,
Gotta keep it sludgy so you can.
you have to keep it sludgy. So yeah, you will pay to haul water.
And how deep is the lagoon?
16.
Yeah, it's,
Only between 12
no,
and 13 feet, I think,
yeah.
but that's. the
Well, there's a
very top.
layer of gravel of P-rock in there also.
Yes.
So it doesn't go all the way to the bottom. The gravel in there, the P-rock's in there, it tells the sludge pump guy when he's pumping it out or whoever, when you start seeing the rocks, you need to stop, you've already hit the bottom of it. Plus that also retains to stop the liner from wanting to lift.
So if
It's a weight.
if there's a 4-foot water cap, then the lagoon is full when there's 9 feet of sludge.
Well, approximately.
Yes. And we haven't gotten 9 feet of sludge in 13 years. That's actually pretty
Well,
impressive.
pretty close.
No, but it's still pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's pretty close. So now that we're at the end of that, how we look when we'll budget it is why I tell you, look at how I write the budget up. A lot of that stuff for a new truck, those are flags. And those, because we have to show that we have use for that money. When it's time to haul, we will shrink the other line items down to almost nothing, move that money and enlarge the line item for biosolids. You understand what I just said?
From one year to the next.
Yeah, so we budget $75,000 a year per truck. That will drop it down to 10,000 or something, keep the line item, and we'll take all that money, and that was what we will budget for that fiscal year we're gonna haul. Not saying we can't, we still need to add more to it.
Right. But we budget something every year for biosolids.
Right, and so what I don't want to see happen is what happened when we had to redo the plan. Was that the maintenance wasn't it wasn't taken care of, and plus there was no reserve money.
Mhm.
So, by the time this happens, maybe not all of us will be on the board. And Dan may be, down in Mexico.
Is that the plan?
So we don't want to give the next board a nightmare.
Right.
So if you look how I like the
Financial
budget,
nightmare.
do not like to see capital resource ever go below $500,000.
Mhm.
Okay? And that takes into consideration for the biosolids when we have to haul it.
Mhm.
Okay?
So every year when we put biosolids, there's a budget line for biosolids every year.
There is a line.
What happens to that money when we aren't?
So that money, you can't, the board may have a different idea. I don't believe the ratepayers should be paying an exorbitant amount of money for $500,000 to sit in the bank and do nothing for maybe the day that we're gonna need it. Okay? My bottom line for capital resource, and I've done this 25 years, I like to keep that at $500,000. I have it flagged for other things, like emergency funds and things like that. There's like 200,000 for emergency. But remember, that's a category. We can move any of those line items into one category if we need to.
But Dan, no inflation increases over all that time for that private.
Well, we've had issues that come up that money gets used. So we used $600,000 to build the shop in the back.
Yeah.
There was over.
I'm just saying, a target like that, a guideline that you're using for 30 years could stand to be increased a little bit based on
Well,
money not being worth as much.
So
anymore.
it has, Jim brought up the 500,000. It's always been around 250, 260,000. So half of that capital resource, I've always kept flagged for hauling biosolids. Now, I don't think it's $500,000.
Well,
But-
but the problem with that is that, and maybe we're not, maybe, I'm taking up too much time here. But
No, this is good discussion.
we used to be able to take it to Springfield,
Oh, yeah, we know about that.
Oh.
It has to be hauled to Central Oregon or something.
maybe not,
Okay.
because the way,
Could be
the way
pushed.
things are going, it may be more complicated than that.
And more expensive.
Right.
Or
I
people
don't know.
accept
I mean, it just,
Okay.
since I've been sitting here, I've seen things crazy stuff now. As
So we will
far
write
as
up,
inflation goes.
I will write up a biosolids plan for board's review. They have to do that. It's mandatory 5 years before you think you're gonna have to haul your biosolids. We won't be adding more to it. We'll be on the other lagoon. We'll let that sit, and our term is cook. We'll let that drop as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yes. We'll bring in a company, we'll run a biosolids plan, 5 years. So I'll have 5 years, the board, the district will have 5 years to plan to haul that out. In that 5 years, we're going to be getting cost estimates from the ones that haul it, where you have to haul it by then. Right now, it's
How you have to
speculation.
haul it.
Huh?
How you have to haul it.
Yeah, how you have to haul it, well, the biggest thing, Jim, is not how you have to haul it, it's where do you haul it to?
Well, right.
Yeah, so your disposal, can we still go to Roseburg and dispose? Can that Roseburg plant take that much? It takes biosolids in?
What
Yeah.
happens to it when it gets to a place like Roseburg? What do they do with it?
Well, they further treat it. They can turn it into compost. They can incinerate it.
Huh.
So there's different options
Huh.
that you can do with that.
Okay.
They could run it through a sludge press, squeeze more water out of it, stabilize it for a land application,
So they're getting,
stabilize it to put into a dump.
biosolids from all over the state.
Yes,
Okay, your 5-year plan, the budgeting part is still a little bit soft to me. You've currently been holding a placeholder in the budget of about 250 or so for
yeah,
future, okay, let me finish. For the future costs.
right.
But then when you get to the 5 years point, do you do anything different to kind of beef that up, or is it just the year before you're gonna move stuff?
No, not even before. So the budget, we will have fairly accurate number 2 to 3 years before we haul.
Okay, before you were talking about moving the line items for trucks down so that you can move the line item for biosolids bigger, I thought you said, so.
Yeah, transfer, you'll shrink one line item. Remember, you're working within a category.
Right,
So within that category, we will have the ability to move funds around to increase the biosolids. I think right now it shows there's 80-some thousand dollars in there. And $200,000, yeah,
so I was right, you're gonna,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
80,000 is gonna balloon to 200 and something, not
exactly.
because you're adding
Yeah.
to it, but you're
Yeah.
transferring.
Yeah.
So really, we've already budgeted in advance for that expense. I mean, we've already got the money.
Mhm.
And do we need to put more in there?
We will, Jim's correct, we will. I can't tell you how much right now because we're not close enough to know to even call in a contractor to even give us a price.
So we're not within 5 years yet.
Yeah.
Okay, what are we, 10?
So when I tell the board, we have switched over to the East Lagoon. We figure the 5-year clock is going to start, that we're gonna have to start planning to add that money in every year to make the haul. And in that 5 years, while it's out there doing its natural biological process, we should have a fairly accurate, because we'll have to do another sludge study, sludge depth study, that we can give to the contractor to say, this is how much sludge is there.
And do we stir it up during that time or
No.
anything like that? So it just sits. What's
It's
what's
anaerobic.
what stops it from becoming really solid while it sits there for 5 years?
Well, you want it to come really solid. You
Well, you
want
say
it
you-
to
you still-
decay to a point.
You still want to be able to pump it though.
Yeah. So what they'll do, when we take the 4 foot of water cap off, there'll probably be a little bit left on there. And then they will stir it with mixers and turn it into a slurry.
Okay.
The slurry thickness is up to the contractor what their pumps and trucks can haul.
Yeah.
So I can't tell you what that slurry, I mean, is it gonna be 80% solids, 20% water? Is it gonna be 90? I can't tell you that. My crystal ball doesn't go that far out, so it'll be stirred up. It's just not gonna pull the water off and start sucking it out. They'll have to stir that up. They'll put in power mixers and they will mix it up so they can haul it.
And there's specialists who do this job.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, we're not equipped. There'll be a business that comes in with a trucking fleet and all the equipment and crew.
It's kind of like trying to find people whose life's goal is to work in the sewer treatment plant.
Well, no, it turns out that there's another industry past the sewage treatment plant, which is the biosolid moving company.
Right.
So I can't tell you if we haul to Eastern Oregon to the desert area and land
Yeah.
apply. what they'll do with the product when it's
They
done.
might even find a way to turn it into energy at some
And
point.
just so you know, one of the reasons I get nervous about this is, I work in a conservation field. And there are people that don't like putting it, where it used to go.
Well,
And they used to grow,
yeah, but
they used to grow things.
yeah, it turns out there's a lot of
And so
PFAS and
every
other
once
stuff
in a
in there,
while,
which is not good for us to put on our farm fields.
Every once in a while, they'll come up with a bill and take it to Senate.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
it never passes.
PFAS it's, you can't remove medications.
All the
You can take
pharmaceuticals that are in there.
Metal.
You cannot take pharmaceuticals out of water. There's a lot of things you can't remove. You can't remove heavy metals. Remember, it's an organic
Yeah,
process.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of reasons why, and your setbacks, land apply is so strict now that
So we've kind of gotten to the end of our process, so
Yeah.
maybe a 10-minute break. It's around an hour and a
Good
half.
for you. Yeah, probably.
Good-
yeah,
good
so
for
we're at the end, and then if the board.
And we've talked about all the components of the system now. There's nothing else that we haven't mentioned.
Other than this building.
Nothing that I would say would be a large financial.
Okay.
It's other than this building,
You,
Yeah,
yeah,
like
Jim was right.
HVAC and all that.
No, I was just doing the treatment system.
Yeah.
We can talk
But I
about.
mean, it's part of the system.
You guys are components.
This building,
This building, the trucks, I consider separate components because they're not of anything that really is a consumable, a failure point or something.
well, except.
Including the HVAC.
Yeah.
Okay. There is maintenance, just like any house, there's maintenance to your property.
Yeah.
And these are maintenance items. It's just more expensive because it's an industrial building, a
Mhm.
commercial building, and not so much. a house.
Well, Dan, thank you. And thank you guys to the extent I was kind of steering us to that kind of a discussion. I really needed it
Mhm.
to understand how things work and then what the pieces are in it. So I will be less aggressive. But it really helped me. So thank you. And, I hope it helped you too.
Well, and I'd like to leave a good note. I'm big on maintenance, as you have seen throughout the years. So we're not gonna have what happened to us, a long time ago, Jim, where you're looking at another $35 million of debt.
Well, right, and I
don't run this place into the dirt like the last one.
I'm not the treasurer, I'm not the, but it says at large. And so I, in my head, I'm speaking for the public that doesn't have a clue.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden,
Mhm.
and so what I agree with Dan, we've always been trying to keep on top of things.
Yeah.
And unfortunately with this, checking out the pipes, lack of person power and the pandemic
Mhm.
had a lot to do with the fact that we couldn't get out. So,
I guess one of my real wants from the board personally is that you get more familiar with the actual budget and the budget process, so that you understand what you're budgeting for and why, because you're the ones that speak to the public.
Mhm.
I mean, they're gonna come to you guys and ask, why'd you do this? Why did you do that? Why you have so much money left over?
Mhm.
Because really the mindset with the public is, you got $1 left, why don't you just knock $1 off our user fees? They don't think about what it costs to keep this running, and so that they're not left with debt, because your next choice is revenue bonds to pay for something that you should have been saving for all.
well, and they probably won't even go that deep. It's just a matter of, how come my rates are going up?
And the incorporation stuff, I had to learn and read other city budgets around Tillamook. And it was a surprise to me that by far the largest item in most of them is cash carryover. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars, even for a small budget. And I guess I'm kind of understanding that's because it's probably in their mind, at some point that money is going to go into something that they're anticipating a need for. Otherwise, there would be a big squawk about what you've got all this money left over. Why don't you reduce my tax?
If you don't have a cash carry forward every year, a few $100,000, I mean, I think like for us, a couple $100,000, you're starting out negative. You're starting out at a risk that you're gonna have catastrophic failure and you're gonna be going to the bank to borrow money.
Well, we did
Now
just,
you're-
just learn that a pump can fail.
Yeah. And
Insurance, it's for
But
insurance.
revenue bonds, you have to do a revenue bond.
Yeah.
And that's not cheap on the public. You save them $1 here, but you cost them
Yeah.
20 or 30 or 40 over here.
Down the road.
I know you have an opinion on this, I think, because I've heard you hint at it. But it seems to me, just absorbing talk of what happens at the other water districts, that we are centuries ahead of them in this kind of planning, and considering that they might be a lot more vulnerable to big surprises and problems in their system than we are. You don't have to, I mean,
I believe so.
that's, I've been absorbing that and getting that impression.
That's why when it's brought up to me about combining all the districts, you just get
Forget
this back from me, because
you know,
I don't know how they ever ran all these decades. You don't want to be handed a huge expense
Mhm.
to have the things. So,
Yeah.
So the 10-minute break you suggested 5 minutes ago is now in effect.
all right.
Okay.
I'm stopping
More
recording,
What time is it for the break?
2:30
2:30 on the nose.
Okay,
on those.
2:30.